My father was living the American dream. Here he was handed the reins of a successful cabinet working company by his father, and he ran it well, and he cultivated new businesses. And he thought that this is what the American dream was about. Being able to raise your family, being able to raise your children, getting them a good education. He saw no limit to his company's ability. In 1978, as I was coming out of Bishop McDevitt High School, a referendum came up in Atlantic City to legalize gambling. And it was passed overwhelmingly. My father immediately saw an opportunity. I began to work for him as an accountant, also as a project manager on smaller projects. As the business in Atlantic City began to build, so did the revenues for the Friel company. In 1980 and 1981, our revenues jumped up over $3 million to over $4 million a year. So we had a very good name in Atlantic City as a good quality cabinet working company. We received a $415,000 contract from Perini Corporation to build and install all the casework, laminate casework, cabinetry in and throughout the Trump Plaza. Our contract began in November of '83. We started building equipment, shipping it down to Atlantic City, and our carpenters would go there and install it. When you do a project, at the very end of the project, you're handed a punch list. That punch list signifies certain things that were not done properly, and they have to be repaired and fixed to satisfaction of that contract. Our contract ended in March of '84. So we got a punch list, I believe it was 2 pages long. The Perini superintendent for the interior signed off on our punch list and said, okay, now you can send your bill to New York. Within about 3 days, I got a call from Robert Trump, and he asked me if he could speak with my father. So my dad got on the phone, spoke with Robert Trump, and when he got off the phone, he said, Robert wants to see me down at the Trump Plaza tomorrow. The next morning, he went down to the Trump Plaza about 9 o'clock in the morning, was taken up to the 26th floor where he sat in a room with about 9 other men. One by one, they started getting called into an office. My father walked in, and Donald did all the talking. And it started out by Donald saying, we're really unhappy with your work. We think it's inferior. But what we're willing to do is this. If you're happy with what you've been paid on this contract from Perini Corporation, you'll continue to work for the Trump organization in the future, and we have other jobs planned down here. My father kind of interrupted Donald and said, well, I don't even know why we're talking about money because Perini owes me $83,000. You don't owe me $83,000. Donald said, what you don't know, Ted, is that we just bought out Perini. They're done as the GC, the hotel's done, the casino's done. We are now the owner and the GC on the job, and we will be paying out all subcontracts. Now, it struck my father immediately, if the work was inferior, then why would Donald Trump want him to work for him in the future? My father listened again, and Donald said, or if you're not happy, you can simply sue us for the $83,000. We'll see you in court. So now we're about 3 months into this lawsuit, and my father's lawyer came in and said, look, here's what's going to happen, and Donald Trump knows this. You're going to win in October when you go to court because you have an ironclad case, but they're going to appeal it. By the time the appeal rolls around, they know that you're going to owe me upwards of $83,000. And so my father said, so what do you suggest? He said, as a friend, Ted, if I were you, I would drop this and move on. So my father decided, yeah, we're going to drop this lawsuit and take about a $30,000 hit with the legal fees that had built up and move on. Well, this is where things got ugly because the Hilton company had decided to start a project up on the marina side of Atlantic City, and it had been the same architect we had dealt with on 3 or 4 of the other jobs. The architect told my father that the Trump organization was a client of theirs, and that Donald had given them a list of 14 other companies, along with the Edward J. Friel company, that they were never going to be allowed to deal with anymore. And my father said, well, this isn't a Trump project. And he said, Ted, it doesn't matter. They're a client of mine. So I have to abide by what they say, and you are no longer allowed to do any business with my firm. And my father said, so they're blackballing us. He said, Ted, I don't know what to call this, but I can't send you anything. I can't do any business with you. There was no reason to do that other than, I feel, because we sued him, he became vindictive and he found a way to get back at us, even though we had dropped the lawsuit. A few months later, as we realized that we were not going to get any more work in Atlantic City, layoffs were imminent at the Edward J. Friel Company. And unfortunately, the first people to go were going to be the union cabinet workers who did the majority of the work, who produced the product that was installed and paid for. And even though they were union and they could go back to the hall, the people that worked for my father treated like family. They came to our Christmas parties, they came to his birthday parties, they came down to his shore house, and it hurt him greatly to let these people go. He knew their wives, their kids, their families, their fathers. For the longest time, he was very reluctant to let anyone go. And I kept telling him, we can't afford to keep them. There's no work coming in. We don't have a choice. And he would look at me and say, Paul, this is family. These are our family. I know their kids. He's not going to have a paycheck next week. Eventually, he had no choice. He began to lay off the union cabinet workers downstairs. And it hurt him. There were tears. There were handshakes. There were promises to bring them back, which never happened. I remember a lot of sad days. I remember seeing my father with tears in his eyes, telling these people, I can't afford to keep you anymore because I just don't have the work. And you just brought up a really bad memory. Jesus. Wow. Within a year to 16 months, the earnings for the Edward J. Friel Company dropped from over $4 million to about $300,000 to $400,000 a year. And for a company of 27 people to try to keep the union cabinet workers busy, to try to keep shipping staff busy and clerks busy, it wasn't possible losing that much revenue inside of 16 months. And that's when his American dream came to an end, because the lawsuit took so much out of him and took so much out of the company that he never recovered from it. Mentally, he never recovered from it. Physically, he never recovered from it. Donald Trump thinks he can make America great again, but he's left nothing but ruins everywhere he's gone. He has continued to hurt the little guy. He's continued to not pay the bills that he's promised to pay. And that's not the American dream. And my father was a very proud Ronald Reagan conservative. And he believed in hard work. He believed in paying your own way. And he was also the chairman of the Cheltenham Township Republican Party. My father would be disgusted with the fact that Donald Trump is the nominee for his party, the Republican Party, in 2016.